What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Week 7 wide receiver trade targets. I'll be doing the same thing as I did last week. I've split the trade targets into 2 videos, so I'll go over wide receiver buy low and sell high in this one, then running backs tomorrow. We're using the same logic as always for wide receivers. We're trying to find players who are getting a good amount of targets, who are getting a lot of air yards, who are running high upside routes, but who haven't been able to find the end zone recently. So, with that being said, let's start things off on the buy low side with Mike Williams. And after posting an unsustainable 11 touchdowns on 43 receptions last season, Williams hasn't scored yet this year. In fact, he's the only wide receiver in the top 26 of air yards that hasn't scored yet. He ranks 11th in air yards between Hopkins and Golladay, ranking 1st over the last 2 weeks, and 1st in unrealized air yards since week 3, including the week where he didn't even play. I included him in last week's video, so I don't want to go super in-depth on him this week, since all of the exact same things are true. But if you look at where his routes were this week, it's the exact same as we said in the last week's video. They're going deep downfield. They're angled towards the end zone. They're very high upside routes, so the air yards are going to continue. And if he's going to continue playing around 90% of snaps, and they're going to continue to be down in games, he's a really solid wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside every single week. And I can guarantee you'll be able to get him cheaper than that in trades. One thing I would just watch is practice reports this week. He did leave the game with a leg injury last week. Dr. David Chow didn't really think it was much of anything, but just watch the reports out of practice. Is he at least out there in a limited fashion to make sure he's okay before trading for him? The next player is DeAndre Hopkins. He ranks 10th in air yards, 6th in targets, and is tied for 4th in receptions, yet he ranks 15th in full PPR, and that might not sound that bad. I mean, he might just be getting a little bit unlucky ranking 15th, but since week 2, he's 27th, posting an average stat line of 6.4 receptions for 58 yards and has not scored since week 1. I'm not going to sit here and explain to you why DeAndre Hopkins is an elite wide receiver. Everyone watching this video knows that he is, and everyone you're trading with also knows that. But he's going to have a spiked week soon, and I'm confident that a good chunk of people watching this video are playing in a league where the owner of DeAndre Hopkins has 2 or fewer wins. Maybe that's not the case for the majority, but a good chunk of people are in a league where that's true because he was likely a first-round pick, and he's struggled to produce since week 1. And if that's the case for you, then target him aggressively, because it only takes one big game from him for his owners to stop even looking at trade offers that include him. I'd also like to point out that he plays the Bucs championship weekend, and that shouldn't sway your decision making much at all, but it certainly helps having a matchup that's an extreme pass funnel where he's very likely to post a nice stat line. Tyler Lockett is the third wide receiver we'll talk about, and this one might come as a surprise. He's caught all 13 of his targets over the last 3 weeks and has 3 touchdowns on 35 receptions this season, which means he hasn't really been unlucky with touchdowns. However, he ranks 1st in this week's buy low model. Also, Will Dissly likely tore his Achilles. I don't know 100% as of recording this video. I believe the MRI already happened, but I haven't personally seen a report, but it looks very likely he tore his Achilles. So a few more targets each week are up for grabs, and realistically, how many players in the Seahawks are really going to even get looks? Plus, both his upcoming schedule and championship schedules look great. He plays the Ravens, Falcons, and Bucs over the next 3 weeks. Then he gets a home matchup with the Cardinals in week 16. It's certainly possible that Marlon Humphrey slows him down this week, but if he has a good game, then you will not be able to trade for him for the rest of the season because he's going to destroy the Falcons, destroy the Bucks. And there are also a few other matchups that are going to go in his favor as well. So I've given you a wide receiver 1 and a wide receiver 3 to trade for. Well, Lockett is the top wide receiver 2 if you're looking for a player more in that range. If you're looking for a wide receiver you could potentially flip after a big performance, then how about Brandin Cooks? He's posted an average stat line of 2 receptions for 35 yards and 0 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, doing so on 6 total targets. He left week 5 with a head injury, but he returned to play 98% of snaps last week. He hasn't scored since week 2, and the Rams look bad, losing 3 straight games. But here's the thing. They play the Falcons this week in a game that's all but guaranteed to shoot out. The Falcons have either the worst or the second worst defense in the league, but they're the best possible matchup for wide receivers because of how explosive their offense is. When you play a team like the Dolphins, you can do whatever you want on offense, but then it's a blowout by the second quarter. With the Falcons, you can do whatever you want on offense again, but you have to keep scoring because their offense can actually keep up with you. So Cooks should have a spiked week, and then he gets a matchup with the Bengals in the following week. So you can look to trade him either at the end of this week, at the end of the next week after he explodes likely in both matchups, or just buy low and take the really nice discount because I can guarantee you people are not asking for a lot for Brandin Cooks. That's it for buy low this week. Let's move on to sell high, and there really aren't that many options this week. Juju did absolutely nothing, so he's no longer a sell high. He's really just a try and get rid of for something. Like I said last week, Gabriel and Tyrell Williams are technically the top 2 on the list for sell high, but they're both hurt, so recency bias doesn't really help you there. For this week, I don't love it, but the math suggests that Terry McLaurin is one of the top sell highs this week. The model ranks him as the 4th luckiest player in week 6, and he's 5th among wide receivers with at least 10 receptions in percent of fantasy points that come from touchdowns, despite playing on a team that rarely scores touchdowns. That's something you kind of look for with players. Like, hey, his team doesn't score that much, so his upside's kind of capped, but also he's amongst the leaders in how many fantasy points you get from touchdowns. Like, those two things shouldn't align. You'd expect to see something like that from a team that gets a ton of touchdowns. So after his 100-yard, 2-touchdown game, you might be able to flip him for some nice low-end wide receiver 1 to high-end wide receiver 2 value. But here's the thing. He's also first in the share of team air yards at 52%, 7% better than the next best players. Now, like I said with the touchdowns, that would mean a lot more if he was playing for a team that had a decent passing attack. Like, yeah, he's got 52% of the air yards, but it's on a team that barely has any air yards. So that would mean a lot more if he was on the Patriots or the Saints with Breeze, or just a team that actually throws it decently. So yes, McLaurin is a sell high, but he's not someone that I'm giving away. You should still be getting decent value in return. I also wouldn't be against trading high on T.Y. Hilton. He's 2nd in percent of fantasy points coming from touchdowns, and he actually has -9 unrealized air yards, meaning that he has more receiving yards than he does air yards. That's not necessarily a sign of regression, but together, if you include the percent of fantasy points that come from touchdowns plus having negative unrealized air yards, it indicates that he's been pretty lucky to post the stat lines that he has so far in the year. I still think he's a great player to own with great upside every week, since he's clearly the top option in their passing game. But if you combine his name recognition with his production to date, then I'd be willing to let him go for kind of the same value as McLaurin, low end 1 to high end 2, and I think you can get it. So I think it would be a nice player to include in a trade to a team that needs a wide receiver. The last wide receiver we'll talk about today is Adam Thielen again, and he now has a touchdown on 19% of his receptions this season, which is obviously unsustainable, and he's the wide receiver 9 despite ranking 29th in targets and 33rd in air yards. He's had 2 perfect matchups in a row with the Giants and the Eagles in back-to-back weeks, but the Vikings still really don't want to throw the football. So his stats won't look as good when he's not playing pass funnels and when he's not scoring 5 touchdowns across 6 games. He's again obviously not a player you're just giving away, so make sure you get something in return, but I think people will be willing to give up nice value to get him. So that does it for the sell high players. Again, there really aren't many players I can point to this week that are being severely overvalued, but that's also not really how trading works. You don't start a trade by saying, who should I get rid of? You start a trade by saying, what do I need? Okay, what player should I be targeting that fits that need? Find the team that player is on, and then look at their roster. What does that team need? And do you have the players on your roster to fill that need? Then you offer a trade that's fair and that benefits both teams. So you're not necessarily looking at your roster and saying, who should I trade high on? It's just, if you have one of these players that's getting a little bit lucky and that team also needs a wide receiver and you've identified that team as one that has a player you want to trade for to help out your team, well, then you offer the trade. But don't be offering Terry McLaurin straight up for DeAndre Hopkins because one's a buy low and one's a sell high. No one's going to accept that, and you're just going to annoy the people by sending ridiculous trade offers. So, those are the top wide receiver trade targets for week 7. Remember, I can't go over every single name in the buy low model, so if you want to see the complete list, then you can go to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, and check it out. I'll be going over running back trade targets next, followed by running back start sits on Friday, so be on the lookout for both of those videos. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And if you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.